Have you ever made a choice that felt like surrender, only to realize it saved your life? Claire Bennett was a widowed mother, drowning in hospital bills, watching her daughter's health fade day by day. No family, no lifeline, until a mysterious billionaire cold, calculating, and bound by rules offered her a contract, a fake marriage, financial security in exchange for her silence and presence. But what if that lifeline came wrapped in silence and secrets? Would you sign a contract with someone you barely know just to keep your child alive? Would you stay when the rules begin to blur, or walk away when love gets too close? This isn't just a story about a contract. It's a journey through grief, trust, and the quiet courage of starting again. If you've ever loved, lost, or wondered what you'd risk for someone you love, this story will find its way into your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps bring more stories of healing and hope to life. Let's begin. The sky over Portland was the color of wet concrete, and the air carried that heavy stillness that often comes before a storm. Inside a modest two-bedroom rental on the east side of town, Claire Bennett stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, though the heater hummed low behind her. The kitchen clock ticked like a heartbeat, steady and too loud. Her daughter, Emma, barely 10, lay asleep on the couch, a light quilt tucked up to her chin. A tangle of wires snaked from her chest to a small portable monitor, blinking its rhythmic reminder that time was both precious and cruel. Claire had stopped counting medical bills 3 weeks ago. There was a pile of them on the counter now: co-pays, treatment estimates, an invoice from the children's hospital marked urgent. Even with her 2 part-time jobs, one at the library, another at the diner, she was still sinking. Her savings had evaporated long ago. Life insurance from her late husband had gone straight into surgeries, medication, travel. She closed her eyes. That winter had lasted longer than just months. It stretched back to the day she got the call her husband David's car had spun out on black ice on Highway 26. They told her he didn't suffer, as if that made any difference. She opened her eyes again when she heard the door creak. Emma stirred, a soft, wheezing cough escaping her lips. Claire moved swiftly, gently adjusting the oxygen flow. Emma's eyes fluttered open. "Hi, Mama," she whispered, voice hoarse. Claire forced a smile, brushing her hair back from her forehead. "Hey, sweet pea. You feeling okay?" Emma nodded, then whispered, "Don't be sad." Claire's throat tightened. "I'm not sad, just tired. A lie, wrapped in softness." That night, after Emma fell asleep again, Claire sat in the dark with a mug of lukewarm tea in her hands, scrolling through her email. Spam, overdue notices. Then something new, a forwarded message from an old friend who worked in corporate PR. Subject: discrete opportunity. High compensation. Urgent. Claire almost deleted it on instinct, but desperation has a way of making you read every word twice. The message was brief. A wealthy tech CEO was seeking a temporary, contractual partner, not for romance, but for strategic image alignment. The compensation was staggering, more than enough to cover Emma's treatments and start fresh somewhere quiet. Her friend's note was even shorter. "Claire, I know how things are. This is real. I trust the man behind this, even if he's cold as steel. If you're desperate, Consider it. The message came with a phone number and two words that felt like both salvation and surrender call tomorrow. That night, Claire lay awake on the couch beside Emma, listening to the soft hiss of oxygen. She held her daughter's tiny hand and stared at the ceiling. The old plaster cracked like a map of every wrong turn she'd made. She didn't believe in miracles, but she believed in choices. And right now, she had none. The office building didn't look like anything special from the outside. Brick exterior, a modest black awning, no signage. Claire checked the address again, certain she'd misread something. She hadn't. This was it. She smoothed the front of her coat, fingers trembling slightly. Beneath it, she wore the nicest blouse she owned. It was 2 years old, but pressed. Inside, the elevator chimed softly as it rose to the 5th floor. The hallway smelled faintly of cedar and coffee, understated but expensive. A woman in a gray suit greeted her with the kind of poise that made Claire straighten her spine without thinking. "You must be Ms. Bennett," she said, with a practiced smile. "Mr. Cole is expecting you." Claire followed her through a set of frosted glass doors into a private conference room. It was quiet, spacious. Warm light spilled in through wide windows that framed the Portland skyline. He was already there. Damien Cole stood by the window, a tablet in hand, dressed in tailored charcoal gray. He didn't look up immediately, which gave Claire a second to take him in. Tall, controlled. His posture was precise, like someone who always stood ready for a battle, even if he never let anyone see the armor. Then he turned. His gaze met hers with a calm so steady it felt almost clinical. No smile, no pleasantries, just 2 words. "Have a seat." Claire obeyed. "I'll be direct," he said, placing the tablet down. "This is not a romantic arrangement. You're not being asked to entertain me. This is transactional." Claire swallowed. "I understand. I need a wife. For 12 months. 1 year." Why his eyes narrowed? Not unkindly, just sharp. "Because my board of directors believes a married man is more stable, more trustworthy. It's a perception thing. Investors like clean stories, and I'm supposed to play the clean story." His lips twitched, not quite a smile, but maybe the ghost of one. "You'll be compensated, generously." He handed her a folder. Claire opened it with cautious fingers. Legal language, signature lines, payment schedule. A total of $750,000 divided in quarterly deposits, plus coverage of Emma's full medical treatment, housing, and a discretionary stipend. Claire stared at the numbers. Her hands started to shake. Damien noticed. His voice softened just a fraction. "You may have question." "I have a daughter," she said. "She's 10. She's sick." "I know." She looked up, startled. "I don't make blind offers. I read your story. I know who you are. Ms. Bennett. I know what happened to your husband. I know what the insurance didn't cover. And I know what you're willing to sacrifice." Claire leaned back, her breath catching. "Why me?" He paused, then said, "Because you have dignity. Because even at your lowest, you don't beg. That's rare." His words were not meant to flatter. They were matter of fact, and somehow that made them land harder. "You'll have your own room," he added. "We will appear together in public. Dinners, events, press, but behind closed doors, You'll have complete freedom. No physical expectations. Claire blinked. No expectations? She repeated, almost unsure if she heard him right. Damien's gaze didn't waver. None. But there are rules. He slid a second document across the table, a set of guidelines. Rule 1. No personal entanglements. You do not ask about my past. I will not ask about yours. Rule 2. Do not speak to the press under any circumstances. Rule 3. This contract must run its full term 12 months. No early termination. If you breach it, all benefits end. Rule 4. You must wear a wedding ring in public at all times. Rule 5. He stopped, then added quietly, don't fall in love. Claire let out a breath. That one's easy. Is it? The silence between them was thick for a moment. She looked down at the contract again. Her daughter's pale face flashed in her mind the way she curled into Claire's side on bad nights, whispering she was scared. The mounting bills, the closed doors, the cold calls. Then she picked up the pen. Damien watched as she signed her name. I'll have my assistant arrange everything, he said, gathering the papers. We marry next Thursday. There will be photos, one public statement, then we disappear. Claire stood, her legs unsteady. You don't even want to know my favorite color. I assume it's irrelevant. She tilted her head. And yours? He paused by the window, then said without looking back, black. Claire gave a dry, almost laugh. Of course it is. As she stepped out into the winter air, the wind caught her hair. The sky had cleared slightly. She looked up at the pale clouds, then down at the copy of the contract in her hands. 12 months. Just a year, but somewhere in her chest, something whispered, everything changes in a year. The car that came to pick Claire up was black, sleek, and silent. Like everything else Damien Cole touched, it was efficient and unshowy. The driver greeted her with a nod, helped her load Emma's medical equipment into the back, and said nothing during the ride. Portland fell behind them in the rearview mirror, replaced by winding roads and tall trees. The mansion, Noah Estate, sat on a hill north of the city, surrounded by evergreens, gray stone, tall windows, a house built to keep people out, not welcome them in. As the car pulled into the long drive, Claire reached for Emma's hand. The little girl had fallen asleep, her lips parted slightly, a sketchbook resting on her lap. Claire whispered, "We're okay, sweetheart." The front doors opened before the car stopped completely. A woman stepped out mid-50s, salt and pepper hair pinned neatly, dressed in a navy blouse and trousers. Her presence was calm, almost maternal. "You must be Ms. Bennett," she said. "I'm Lee Caldwell, Mr. Cole's executive assistant. I'll help you get settled." Claire got out slowly, eyeing the tall windows and the quiet that seemed to blanket the grounds. "Where is—" Mr. Cole? Lee smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "He's traveling. He'll return later this week." Inside, the house was restrained. No family portraits, no clutter. Every surface spotless, walls lined with abstract art and quiet, expensive taste. Claire followed Lee through a long hallway to a suite on the east wing. Double doors opened into a space that took her breath. A queen bed dressed in ivory linens. A reading nook by the window. A private bathroom with stone tile and a clawfoot tub. "Mr. Cole had this prepared for you and your daughter," Lee said, motioning toward a second adjoining room where a hospital bed had been installed, complete with monitors. oxygen tanks, and a cozy rocking chair by the window. Claire turned to her. He did this himself. Lee's smile softened. He made sure it was done properly. That night, after Emma was settled, Claire stood at the window, looking out into the darkness. Somewhere in the West Wing, she imagined Damien reading stock reports or sipping black coffee at a spotless desk. They were under the same roof, but it felt like two different worlds. The next morning, Claire woke early and wandered into the kitchen. She expected silence, maybe a staff breakfast she wasn't part of. Instead, she found Lee making coffee and slicing apples. The air smelled of cinnamon and toast. Claire hesitated. "I can make my own nonsense," Lee said. "You're the lady of the house now, even if only on paper." Claire smiled faintly. "Paper's about all it is." Lee handed her a mug. "Don't be so sure." Later, as she explored the house, Emma asleep again, Claire came across a room that didn't match the rest. The door had been left slightly ajar. Inside was a music room. A grand piano sat near tall windows. Sunlight poured in. The room was warm, quiet, and lived in. A single mug on the bookshelf. A faded photograph in a silver frame on the piano. A young boy beside a girl, both smiling. Claire picked it up. "They were children," Lee said from behind her. Claire jumped slightly. "Mr. Cole and his sister," Lee added. "That was before she passed." Claire's heart twisted. "I didn't know he had a sister. He doesn't talk about her. She died when they were teenagers." "I'm sorry." Lee nodded. "So is he, even if he'll never say it." 2 nights later, Damien returned. Claire heard the front doors open just past midnight. Footsteps on the marble floor. A brief murmured exchange. Then silence. She didn't see him until the next morning. He was standing at the dining room table, reading a paper, a cup of black coffee in hand. "Good morning," he said without looking up. Claire pulled her robe tighter. "You don't need to greet me like a guest." "I don't," he replied. "You live here now." She sat across from him, pouring herself a cup of tea. The air felt too still. "I saw the music room," she said. His eyes flicked to hers. Something unreadable passed between them. "It was hers," he said simply. "She played. She lived." Claire didn't respond. There was a grief in his voice, so contained it felt dangerous to touch. After a beat, Damien stood. "Lee will go over the schedule. Our first public event is next Friday, a charity dinner in Seattle. You'll have something appropriate to wear delivered tomorrow." She blinked. "You've thought of everything." He turned toward the door. "I like order." Just before he left the room, Claire said quietly, "And what do you do when people don't fit your order?" He paused. "I don't let them close enough to try." That night, Claire sat in the quiet music room, Emma asleep upstairs, and stared at the piano. She didn't play, but something about the silence made her feel like the house was waiting, not for music, but for someone to hear. A week passed. Claire found her rhythm, if it could be called that, between long walks through the manicured gardens and quiet evenings reading beside Emma's bed. The girl was improving. Slowly. The private nurse Damien hired was gentle, attentive, and kind. Her name was Ms. Harding, and she brought tulips to Emma's windowsill on Thursdays. Claire didn't see Damien much. Their schedules seemed designed not to overlap. But every so often, she caught glimpses. A door closing, a half-finished mug of coffee left on the railing overlooking the back lawn. His silhouette by the window after midnight, still in his suit, still alone. Then, one morning, she found him not by chance, but waiting. He stood in the doorway of the music room, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed but unreadable. "You've never played it," he said. Claire looked up from the book in her lap. "The piano?" He nodded. "I don't play. You sit in here a lot. It's the only room in this house that feels like someone used to live in it." Damien didn't reply at first. He stepped inside, slow and quiet, like entering a chapel. "My mother played," he said, after a pause. "She taught my sister. They'd sit here in the evenings. When I was a kid, I used to lie on the floor and listen." Claire tilted her head. "And you? Did you learn no?" He gave a faint shrug. "I watched. I memorized." He moved toward the piano and ran a finger lightly along the edge of the keys. "After she died, my mother never touched it again." Claire set her book down. "That kind of silence changes a place." Damien nodded. "Or a person." The quiet between them felt thick, but not heavy like something growing roots. She stood and crossed the room to him. "If I did know how to play," she said softly, "what would you want to hear?" He looked at her then, really looked. For the first time, she saw something flicker beneath the surface, not just pain, but something more vulnerable. "I wouldn't ask you to play," he said quietly. "Some things are better left untouched." Later that afternoon, Claire found herself in the greenhouse. It was Lee who had suggested it. "The grounds used to be a mess," she told her. "Damien rebuilt the place after his father passed. The garden was the only thing he kept intact." Claire wandered the rows of hydrangeas and herbs, brushing her fingertips along rosemary sprigs, breathing in warmth and earth. She found a bench near the far wall and sat. Moments later, she heard footsteps. Damien again. He didn't say anything, just sat beside her. The bench creaked slightly under his weight. Claire glanced sideways. "You follow people a lot, Mr. Cole." He didn't blink. "Only when they go, where I can't seem to?" She laughed, not unkindly. "That sounds poetic." He exhaled, almost smiling. "Not my intention." Silence again, but not awkward. It hung between them, like a familiar coat. "You do all of this to protect something," Claire said. "What do you mean? This house? These rules? The contract? The walls you build?" Damien's jaw tensed. "Protection is not a weakness." "No." Claire agreed, "but it's also not living." He turned his head toward her. "What do you know about my life?" "Nothing," she said. "And maybe that's the point." She stood. He didn't try to stop her, but she felt his gaze follow her all the way back to the east wing. That night, a storm rolled in, wind howling across the lake, thunder cracking like bones. Emma cried out in her sleep. Claire rushed in, comforting her gently, soothing her with whispered songs. The monitor beeped once, then settled. She stayed up with her for hours, curled in the rocking chair. Around 3 a.m., there was a soft knock at her door. She opened it cautiously. Damien stood there, barefoot, hair slightly mussed, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "I heard the storm," he said. "Thought you might still be awake." Claire hesitated, then stepped aside. He handed her the mug. She took a sip. It was sweet, unexpectedly so. Damien looked at Emma, then at Claire. She's brave. She has to be. He nodded, then added quietly, "So are you." Claire didn't reply. Her hands tightened around the warm ceramic. "I'm not trying to intrude," he said after a moment. "I just don't sleep well when it rains." She glanced at him. "You and me both." The storm lasted until dawn. Damien stayed for half an hour, saying little, just sitting. And for the first time since they met, Claire didn't feel like she was talking to a stranger. She felt like maybe somewhere behind all that distance, he was just a man still carrying the weight of too many silences. The morning after the storm, the world outside looked washed clean. Sunlight spilled over the terrace, catching on the dew-streaked windows like glass tears. Inside, the house was still. Claire walked the long hallway toward the west wing, a part of the house she rarely entered. Emma was with Ms. Harding in the garden. Lee had gone to the city for meetings. Damien was somewhere. He had left early, according to the note on the kitchen counter, written in clean, tight handwriting, back by evening. Stay inside the grounds. D. But Claire wasn't wandering. She was looking, and she didn't entirely know why. It started the night before, after Damien left her room. She couldn't sleep. Something in his eyes, the weight, the weariness, the guilt had stirred something uneasy inside her. Not fear, but the sense that a story had been left untold. Now, standing in front of a heavy wooden door marked private study, she hesitated. The handle was warm under her fingers. The door wasn't locked. The room inside was dim, lined with shelves. A large desk sat by the window, clean and orderly. No papers strewn about, no mess. Claire's eyes were drawn to a small bookshelf behind the desk, leather-bound journals, all unlabeled. She pulled one out, opened it. Blank. Every single page. She tried another. The same. But then, in the third, she found something. Pressed between the pages was a photograph, yellowed slightly at the edges. A young woman, maybe 17, sitting at the grand piano, smiling, confident. Her hands hovered just above the keys, as though she were mid-note. On the back, a faint pencil scrawl, Juliet, 2002. Claire held the photo longer than she should have. Damien had never mentioned her name. She slipped the photo back into the book and placed it exactly where she found it. But her hands didn't stop shaking. That evening, Damien returned just before sunset. Claire found him standing on the back deck, looking out over the lake, his posture tense. "I went into the study," she said. No preamble. He didn't turn. "I assumed you might." I found her photo. Silence. Then he said, "She was 18. Music scholarship to Yale. She never got to go." Claire stepped closer. "What happened?" He turned, finally. "She drowned." Claire's breath caught. "I'm so sorry." He nodded once. "It was a boating accident. We'd gone out together. I was supposed to be watching her." He paused. "She hit her head when the storm rolled in. By the time I got her back to shore, it was too late." Claire watched him closely. "Why didn't you tell me Damien looked away?" "Because it's the reason everything changed." "You mean the contract, the walls, the way you live?" He didn't answer, but she could see it in the way his shoulders fell slightly, in the way his jaw clenched like he was swallowing grief all over again. "She wasn't just your sister," Claire said softly. "She was the best part of me." he whispered. For a moment, the cold CEO faded, and in his place stood a brother, broken by guilt, haunted by memory. That night, Claire sat with Emma, brushing her hair back from her forehead. Mama, Emma asked sleepily, why did we move here? Claire hesitated. To get help, so you can get better. Emma blinked slowly. Do you trust him? Claire froze. Her daughter's voice was soft, but serious. I don't know, Claire admitted. Emma nodded, like she understood more than a child should. Sometimes, she said, people wear armor because they're scared. But that doesn't mean they're not kind underneath. Claire smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes, because inside, a knot was forming. 2 days later, a manila envelope arrived addressed to Damien, marked confidential. Claire wasn't the kind to pry. But as she passed the front hall that morning, she saw it left on the side table, unopened. She glanced around, then closer. The return address read Barlow and Shaw, legal advisors. Her breath caught. That was the firm that handled David's, her late husband's estate. The same firm that settled the life insurance payout. That had gone strangely silent when she asked about David's corporate projects near the end of his life. Her fingers brushed the envelope. Then she stepped back. No, she wouldn't go there. But the questions now echoed louder. Why Damien Cole? Why had this powerful, guarded man chosen her a widowed mother with no public profile to play his wife? And why did it feel like there was more between them than what was written in that contract that evening? She confronted him. They sat on the back porch, the lake like glass behind them. You knew my husband, Claire said quietly. Damien didn't flinch. Yes. Claire felt the breath leave her lungs. I thought maybe... She continued, but I wasn't sure. Damien nodded once. We worked together. Briefly. He was talented, smart, and you didn't tell me I didn't know how. Damien said. Or when. Or if I should. Claire stared at him, her voice lower now. Was this contract about me? Or about him? For a long time? Damien said nothing. Then, almost too quietly to hear, he whispered, at first, both. And that was when the crack became a fracture. Claire didn't sleep that night. After Damien's words at first, both something inside her unraveled, not violently, not loudly, but like a thread pulled slowly from the hem of something you thought was whole. She stood in the dark kitchen, watching the clock tick toward dawn. Was this all just retribution? A carefully calculated plan, designed not out of compassion, but out of old rivalry. Had she walked right into a life built on shadows? By mid-morning, she was in the garden with Lee. The older woman snipped herbs with the ease of someone who had learned patience long ago. Claire hesitated. Then did you know Lee looked up? About David. Claire nodded. Lee sighed. Only pieces? I didn't ask. Claire crouched beside her, fingering the soft leaves of a sage plant. Why didn't he tell me from the beginning? Because Damien doesn't let himself want things. Not really. He arranges them, controls them. That's how he survives. Claire's voice dropped. And me. Am I another arrangement? Lee set down the shears. I think... You stopped being part of the plan the first time he heard Emma laugh. Claire blinked, surprised. Don't underestimate how much silence he's lived with, Lee added gently. Or how loud your presence is. Later that week, Claire received a letter from an old colleague, a journalist named Mark Hastings. He hadn't heard from her in nearly 2 years, but the letter was short, direct, and unnerving. Claire, I don't know what you've gotten into, but someone's been digging through David's files, the ones tied to the Redwood Project. The name Damien Cole came up in the audit. Something's not right. Be careful. Claire stared at the letter until the ink blurred. Redwood. That was the private contract David had been working on before he died. He'd told her it was government adjacent, sensitive, nothing she needed to worry about. She'd trusted him. And now, the name Damien Cole was surfacing in the same breath as secrecy and death. That night, she went back into Damien's study. The room was empty. The envelope from Barlow and Shaw was gone. But the top drawer of the desk, left slightly ajar, revealed something else. A USB drive, unmarked, tucked beside a pair of cufflinks. She hesitated only a moment, then pocketed it. Back in her room, she booted up the old laptop she used for freelance work, plugged in the drive. It wasn't financial files, not contracts. It was video, footage, grainy but clear. Surveillance from a Redwood research facility, and there unmistakably was David, her late husband, arguing with another man. Claire's heart stopped. The other man wasn't Damien, but the timestamp 2 days before David's accident raised every hair on her skin. She watched the footage 3 times. Each time, her gut tightened. Something was wrong, something big. When she confronted Damien the next morning, he didn't pretend. I knew, he said quietly. I knew about Redwood. David came to me a week before he died. He said someone inside was manipulating data, trying to fake trial results for approval. Claire's hands clenched. And you didn't say anything I couldn't, Damien replied. He asked me to stay quiet until he had proof. Tears welled in Claire's eyes. You let me believe he died in some senseless accident, and all this time, you were holding pieces of his story. Damien stepped closer. Claire, listen, no, she snapped. You should have told me. Before the contract. Before the lies. I didn't lie. You manipulated me. His expression flickered. You offered me a life raft, she continued, voice cracking. But you never said the boat was already sinking. Damien's voice was low. I brought you here to protect you. From what she demanded. The truth, or the part where you used my grief to fix your own guilt. He didn't answer. Because he didn't have to. Claire didn't leave that night. She stayed in Emma's room, sitting by the window, holding her daughter's small, steady hand, the one thing in her world that still made sense. The next morning, she packed a small bag. Not everything, just enough. She didn't leave a note. She didn't slam the door. She just disappeared. She rented a small room above a bookstore in downtown Portland. Quiet. Anonymous. It was there. In the flickering lamplight and the hum of passing streetcars, that she watched the Redwood footage again, this time, not as a wife, but as the journalist she used to be. And then, she called Mark. I'm ready to talk, she said, but not about me. About David, and about what he died trying to expose. Mark's voice on the other end was steady. Then we dig. 2 days later, Damien found her. She was sitting on the bookstore steps, coffee in hand, exhaustion in her bones. He didn't speak right away. When he did, it was simple. I didn't come to bring you back. Claire didn't look at him. Good. I came to say I was wrong. Silence. I used to think protecting people meant controlling the damage, he said. But maybe it means standing beside them while they decide for themselves. She finally turned to face him. His eyes were tired. Honest. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he added. Just a chance to help. Claire took a breath. She didn't say yes, but she didn't walk away either. And sometimes, silence is the closest thing to hope. The day it happened started like any other. Claire sat at the window of her small apartment above the bookstore, the Portland sky gray and quiet. Below, traffic murmured along Burnside Street. Emma's laughter echoed faintly from the next room, where she was coloring with Ms. Harding, who had come to stay with them after Claire left the mansion. A small part of Claire had expected Damien to disappear after their last conversation, but he hadn't. Instead, he sent copies of every document related to Redwood, internal memos, leaked reports, even a voice recording from a private meeting. David's voice, tense but unwavering, outlining the manipulation of drug trial data and naming the key players in the cover-up. What startled Claire most was not what was said, but what wasn't. Damien never appeared in the files. His name, his company, they were clean. Which meant he hadn't been hiding guilt. He'd been hiding grief and trying to carry a promise too big for one man alone. Mark Hastings confirmed it later that afternoon. Claire, I've cross-checked everything. Damien wasn't involved in Redwood's internal scandal. If anything, he was helping David build a firewall, trying to pull funds without alerting the board. Claire exhaled slowly. So, I was wrong about him, she said. Mark hesitated. Not entirely. He should have told you the truth. Claire nodded. He should have. But truth, she'd learned, was never clean. It was jagged and complicated and sometimes wrapped in silence that looked a lot like betrayal. That evening, Claire got the call. It was Lee. Her voice was shaky. Claire, it's Damien. There's been an accident. He'd been driving back from Seattle. A board meeting. Routine. The weather had turned suddenly sharp rain, slick roads. They said he swerved to avoid a stalled car. The impact sent his SUV down a ravine. Rescue teams worked through the night. He was airlifted to Providence Medical Center just before dawn. Unconscious. 2 broken ribs. A fractured collarbone. Internal bleeding. Head trauma. Claire listened to the words as if they were in a language she didn't understand. Then she was already packing a bag. Emma hugged her tightly. Is he going to be okay? Claire didn't know. But she said, he's strong, and prayed that was still true. The hospital was too quiet. Machines beeped in low rhythms. The halls smelled like antiseptic and the ache of waiting. Lee met her at the elevator. Her face was pale. They're doing everything they can, she said. Claire nodded. When she stepped into the ICU, Damien looked smaller than she remembered. Fragile. Wires and tubes snaked from his chest and arms. A bruise bloomed across his temple. His hand, resting on the sheet, looked like stone. Claire sat beside him and whispered, You once told me not to fall in love. A pause, too late. The doctors weren't sure when or if he'd wake up. Claire stayed 2 nights. She read to him, told him stories, whispered the things she was too proud to say when he could answer back. On the 3rd morning, A nurse handed her a sealed envelope. "We found it in his coat," she said. Inside was a flash drive and a short note in Damien's handwriting. "In case anything happens, give this to Hastings. You'll know what to do." Claire called Mark. Then she opened the drive. More documents. This time, all tied to the board of directors at Coal Industries. Names, accounts, bribes. Evidence that several members had ties to the Redwood cover-up and had worked to bury David's findings after his death. It wasn't just about greed. It was about silencing the truth. Claire stood, her heart pounding. She had a choice now: run or stand. That evening, she called Lee. "I need a favor." A week later, the annual investors' conference for Coal Industries took place at the Rainier Grand Hotel, a gathering of suits and shareholders, polished speeches, and rehearsed optimism. Claire arrived in a simple navy dress, hair pulled back, wedding ring still on. She stepped onto the stage like she belonged there. Gasps rippled through the room. She raised the mic. "My name is Claire Bennett. You know me as Damien Cole's wife. What you may not know is that my late husband, David Bennett, died protecting the truth about a project some of you helped conceal." Then she opened her folder, and the war began. They tried to interrupt her, to discredit her, to demand silence. But Claire spoke clearly. The evidence was irrefutable. Mark had backed it with timelines, audio, legal verification. By the time she finished, the boardroom had gone ice cold, and Claire had lit a fire that could not be put out. That night, she returned to the hospital. Damien was still unconscious. She took his hand, resting her forehead against it. "You were right," she whispered. "Sometimes protection means letting someone stand beside you." On the fifth morning, as the sun broke through the clouds, Damien opened his eyes. His voice was hoarse. "You didn't leave." Claire smiled through her tears. "You don't get rid of me that easy." He blinked slowly. "You spoke for me." She nodded. "For you, for David, for all of it." A long pause. Then he whispered, "Thank you." Claire leaned down, pressed her lips gently to his temple. "Next time," she said softly, "don't write the contract with so many rules." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Damien laughed. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 mem. But Claire arrived at 8 in Zahrab. She stood in the lobby of Coal Industries' gleaming glass headquarters, clutching the same Navy folder she had brought to the investor conference. But this time, there was more inside, more evidence, more names, more fire. Lee met her at the elevator, composed as always, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of nerves. "They're expecting a formality," she said, "a check-the-box session. You walking in will change the tone fast." "Good," Claire replied. "They've been comfortable for too long." As the elevator rose, Claire caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. She didn't look like the woman who'd signed a contract in desperation. She looked like someone who had fought her way out of the dark and learned to speak fire. The boardroom was sterile, all chrome and quiet power. 12 chairs, 11 men, 1 woman, all looking up as she entered. "Mrs. Cole?" one of them said. Voice clipped. "This isn't a public hearing. I'm not here as a spectator," Claire replied calmly. "I'm here as interim representative of Mr. Damien Cole, currently incapacitated." She took the empty seat at the head of the table. "You don't have the authority to speak on his behalf. Another board member protested. Claire laid the folder on the table and opened it. I have the documents that grant me legal proxy during his recovery, she said, sliding copies down the table. And, she added, I have a message from him, but you might want to hear what I have first. The room shifted. She stood, her voice steady, low, but charged with intent. For months now, some of you have knowingly worked to obstruct investigations tied to the Redwood Project. A project that resulted in falsified medical data, misused federal grants, and at least one whistleblower's death. A few faces paled. Claire continued, My husband, David Bennett, was that whistleblower. He trusted this company. He trusted some of you. And he paid with his life. She began passing out the second set of documents, signed statements, timelines, email transcripts. Through private channels, you funneled funds to silence key researchers. You hid under confidentiality clauses. You used Damien's absence and emotional isolation to build power behind his back. One of the men, tall, gray-suited, with a clenched jaw, leaned forward. This is conjecture. We'll have legal review. No, Claire interrupted. You'll have federal review. She turned to Lee, who pressed a button on the table. A screen lowered from the ceiling. On it, a live video call opened Mark Hastings, flanked by two attorneys from the Department of Justice. Good morning, Mark said, his voice steady. We've been listening. The room erupted in noise. Voices raised. Accusations flew. One man stormed out. Claire stood still, her hands resting lightly on the table's edge. Then, just as suddenly, silence fell again. Mark spoke. As of this morning, a federal investigation has been formally launched. Mr. Cole's cooperation has been noted. Your financial accounts will be frozen pending review. Claire's voice returned, low and final. Cole Industries will survive this, but not with the same faces at the helm. She turned toward the woman at the far end of the table, the only board member who hadn't spoken. I suggest a vote of removal, effective immediately. The woman raised an eyebrow. And you think you can lead us? Claire shook her head. No, but Damien can. And when he recovers, I'll stand beside him, not behind him, outside. The sky was overcast. Claire stepped into the crisp morning air, her heart still pounding. She had faced them all, not as a pawn in someone else's plan, but as herself. A woman with nothing left to lose and everything worth protecting. 2 days later, Damien was moved out of ICU. Claire was there, waiting. He looked up at her, bruised but alert. They told me what you did. He said, I didn't ask for permission, she replied. He gave her a half smile. Good. A pause. Then I've spent my whole life building walls. Claire, you walked right through every one of them. She sat beside him, took his hand. Then maybe it's time we build something else. That evening, Emma visited for the first time. She sat on the bed beside Damien, handing him a drawing, a picture of their house, the garden, a little stick figure family. This is you, she said, pointing to the tallest figure, and Mama, and me, and a dog. Claire blinked. We don't have a dog. Emma grinned. Not yet. Damien laughed. Weak, but warm, and in that moment, the hospital room felt less like a place of recovery and more like the beginning of home. The next morning, Claire found Damien sitting up, staring out the window. He turned to her. There's something I never told you. he said. She tilted her head. I added one more line to that contract after you signed it. Her eyebrows rose. What did it say? He reached into the drawer and handed her a single page. At the bottom, beneath the last clause, a handwritten note in Damien's script. Rule 6. If I fall in love? I tell her. Claire looked up. Well, she asked, voice soft. I'm telling you now, he said. I love you. Her eyes shimmered. Then she smiled. I rescind the contract, she whispered, effective immediately. He laughed again, and this time, without pain. 3 weeks later, the estate looked different. The air was warmer. The early spring sun reached into corners that had long remained in shadow. Daffodils lined the edges of the driveway, yellow and bright like little promises. Claire stood at the edge of the greenhouse, hands dusty from planting. Her sleeves were rolled up. A breeze tugged at her hair. Emma was just a few feet away, building a fairy house from stones and twigs near the garden path. It felt real, not borrowed, not staged, but hers. And yet, part of her still waited for the other shoe to drop. She heard footsteps behind her. Those aren't tulips, Damien said, teasing. Claire smirked without turning. They'll be whatever I tell them to be. He laughed, a full laugh, something she hadn't heard in weeks. She rose and dusted off her hands. He looked healthier now, stronger. The bruises had faded. His shoulder was healing well, though his movements were still careful. He wore a light gray sweater, soft, not tailored, and it made him look younger, more open. Claire studied him. You're different, she said. He raised an eyebrow. In a good way? In a quiet way? She replied. Like someone who finally stopped carrying the weight of every person he's ever loved. Damien's face grew serious. I haven't stopped, he said, but I think I've learned to let someone carry it with me. Claire didn't respond. Not yet. That afternoon, they walked down to the lake. Emma ran ahead, arms stretched like airplane wings, laughter echoing across the still water. The sun turned her hair gold. Claire and Damien sat on the old bench beneath the sycamore tree, the one his sister once loved. He turned to her. There's something I want to ask you, he said. She smiled faintly. If this is about getting a dog? Emma already won. He shook his head. Not that, though. I might be warming up to the idea. Claire laughed. Then, silence. Not uncomfortable, but full of potential. Damien looked out over the water. I've spent years writing rules, contracts, building walls, because I thought it kept people safe. Because I thought it kept me safe. He turned to her. But none of those things gave me what you gave me. You didn't ask for anything. Claire, you just stayed. I left once, she reminded him. And you came back. He said, only because you let me see who you really were. A long pause. Then Damien reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Claire's heart caught. He opened it, but instead of a ring, it held a simple silver key. This isn't a proposal, he said. Not yet. This is a choice. She blinked. A key to this house, to this life. No contracts, no expectations. Just stay if you want, walk away if you need. Claire looked at it for a long moment. Why a key? Because I spent so long locking myself in. And if I'm going to unlock anything, I want it to be with you. That night. Claire sat by the fireplace with Emma curled beside her, asleep with a book on her chest. The silver key rested on the mantel. She stared at it, heart full and heavy all at once. Lee walked in with 2 mugs of tea. "You look like someone trying to solve a puzzle," she said. Claire took a sip. "Maybe I am." Lee sat down. "You don't owe him anything, I know. But love isn't about debt. It's about direction." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Since when are you the poet?" Lee smiled. "Since I watched 2 broken people make something that almost looks like healing." Claire looked into the fire. "I'm tired of running," she said. Lee nodded, then stopped. In the morning, Claire walked down to the greenhouse. Damien was there, watering the lemon trees. She didn't say anything, just reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the key, placed it in his palm. He looked up. "I'm not staying because I need to," she said. He waited. "I'm staying because I choose to." A long breath escaped him, like he'd been holding it for years. "I was hoping you'd say that," she smiled. And this time, it wasn't cautious or sad or brave. It was just real. That evening, they walked the garden together. Emma danced ahead of them, chasing fireflies. The estate, once a place of shadows and silence, now pulsed with something new. Not noise, but life. And for the first time since David's death, Claire felt something she'd thought had died with him. Hope. 1 year later, the greenhouse bloomed with late spring colors. Sunlight poured through the glass, warming the lemon trees and the herb beds Claire had once hesitated to touch. Emma, now 11 and stronger every day, sat on a blanket near the daisies, reading aloud to the new puppy, a golden retriever named Jasper, who promptly fell asleep halfway through the second chapter. Inside the main house, laughter echoed from the kitchen where Lee was teaching Claire how to make fresh apple pie the right way, as she insisted, not the shortcuts your generation keeps inventing. Claire wiped her hands and peeked into the study. Damien was at his desk, writing not a contract, not an investor report, but something different, something personal. He looked up, and his expression softened. "Everything okay?" he asked. Claire nodded. "More than okay." That evening, after dinner, they gathered on the back porch. The sky was streaked with coral and gold. The lake shimmered quietly in the distance. Claire sat beside Damien on the porch swing. Emma curled on the other side, resting her head on her mother's lap. They didn't need to speak. Some moments are full enough, just as they are. A gentle breeze passed through the sycamore tree, rustling the leaves like a whisper from the past. Claire looked out over the garden, the faint hum of crickets rising. "I used to think healing would feel like forgetting," she said quietly. Damien turned to her. "And now," she smiled, "now I know it feels like remembering, without pain." He reached for her hand. "Do you ever miss who we were before all this?" he asked. She thought for a long moment. "I miss who we thought we had to be," she said, "but not who we are now." Damien nodded, his voice low. "I used to believe love was the thing that cost too much." And now he looked at her. "Now I believe love is the thing that gives the most." The next morning, a letter arrived addressed to Claire from the foundation she had launched, with Mark Hastings, the Bennett Initiative for Medical Truth. It had passed the House and was heading to the Senate bipartisan support, thanks to the documents she and Damien had released. Justice moved slowly, but it moved. She looked at the letter, tears stinging her eyes. Then she walked out to the garden where Damien was trimming the roses. She handed it to him wordlessly. He read it, then pulled her close. David would be proud, he whispered. She leaned into him. So would Juliet. They stood like that for a while, two people who had come from the edges of loss and found each other in the middle. At sunset, Claire took Emma down to the lake. They skipped stones across the surface, laughter mingling with the ripples. Emma turned to her. Do you think Daddy would like it here? Claire looked around at the trees, the water, the life that now filled the once silent estate. I think, she said gently, he'd love it. Before bedtime, Claire found a note on her pillow. Damien's handwriting again, but this time, no rules, no legal lines. Just a question. Still choosing me tomorrow? She smiled, picked up the pen, and wrote beneath it, always. The story wasn't about a cold CEO or a desperate mother. It was about grief and growth, about what it means to carry someone's memory without being crushed by it, and about the quiet courage it takes to choose love not once, but every single day. Sometimes, life offers us choices that don't look like choices at all. They come dressed as desperation, loss, or compromise. But behind every difficult decision lies a chance to grow, to heal, and to love again. Claire's story reminds us that strength isn't always loud. It can look like staying up all night by a hospital bed, or choosing to trust someone when every instinct says to run. And Damien shows us that no matter how long we've lived behind walls, it's never too late to let someone in not out of need, but out of choice. In the end, this story teaches a quiet truth. Healing takes time. Love asks for courage, and the people we hold on to are often the ones who walk with us through our hardest seasons. Whether you're mending your heart, starting over, or learning to forgive, may this story remind you that hope is never out of reach. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If it touched your heart, even just a little, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing stories that heal, inspire, and remind us we're never alone. Until next time, take care and keep your heart open.